Is the glitz and glamour of Hollywood just a beautifully crafted illusion? Behind the radiant smiles and red carpet kisses lie secrets that rarely escape the flashing lights. Today, we dive deep into the high-profile marriage of George and Amal Clooney, a union that epitomized Hollywood perfection to the public eye. But as we peel back the layers of their glamorous exterior, startling truths emerge. Join us as we uncover what really happens behind the Hollywood curtain. Hollywood's perfect power couple. From the moment George Clooney and Amal Alamuddin stepped into the public eye together in 2013, they were hailed as the epitome of Hollywood perfection. Clooney, the eternal bachelor who had long vowed never to marry again, seemed to have finally met his match in Amal, a brilliant human rights lawyer whose elegance, intellect, and grace captivated both the media and the public. Their whirlwind romance, which began quietly, soon became the stuff of fairy tales. By the time they tied the knot in Venice, in September of 2014, the world was completely enamored. The wedding itself was a spectacle straight out of a Hollywood film. Amal, stunning in an Oscar de la Renta gown, walked down the aisle of a historic Venetian palace, while Clooney, ever the leading man, beamed beside her. The guest list read like a who's who of the entertainment and political elite, with everyone from Bono to Anna Wintour in attendance. The ceremony was followed by days of lavish celebrations along the canals of Venice, each moment meticulously documented by paparazzi and fashion magazines. It was a fantasy that seemed almost too perfect to be real. But the Clooneys weren't just about glitz and glamour. They quickly positioned themselves as a power couple with purpose. George continued his dominance in Hollywood, producing and starring in critically acclaimed films, while Amal tackled high-profile human rights cases across the globe. Together, they launched the Clooney Foundation for Justice, channeling millions into global humanitarian efforts. Whether they were hosting star-studded fundraisers at their Lake Como villa or advocating for victims of war crimes, they projected an image of unity, elegance, and shared ambition. To the outside world, they weren't just living the dream, they were redefining it. Yet, behind the flawless facade, subtle cracks were already beginning to form. The perfect balance they projected was, in reality, much harder to maintain. And while the world saw a fairy tale, those closest to them, including Brad Pitt, saw something else entirely. Pitt's recent revelation has finally pulled back the curtain, exposing the darker reality behind the picture-perfect marriage. The fairy tale begins to crack. For years, George and Amal Clooney seemed untouchable, a modern-day royal couple gracing red carpets and humanitarian galas with effortless charm. Their life was a curated blend of Hollywood prestige and international sophistication. Whether they were strolling hand-in-hand through Venice, attending the Met Gala in coordinated couture, or giving joint interviews about their philanthropic efforts, they always seemed perfectly in sync. But, as with any carefully crafted image, the truth was far more complicated. The first whispers of trouble began to circulate in 2017, shortly after the birth of their twins, Ella and Alexander. While the arrival of their children was undoubtedly a joyful milestone, it also marked a turning point in their marriage. George, who had spent decades enjoying the freedom of a bachelor lifestyle, suddenly found himself navigating the challenges of fatherhood in his mid-50s. In interviews, he often joked about being an old dad, but beneath the humor lay a deeper sense of exhaustion and uncertainty. Amal, for her part, faced an equally daunting balancing act. While George's career allowed for flexibility and creative control, her work as an international human rights lawyer was relentless and demanding. High-profile cases took her across continents, often requiring weeks of travel at a time. Initially, they made it work, splitting their time between their homes in Los Angeles, Lake Como, the English countryside, and Manhattan. Private jets and luxury accommodations softened the strain, but even immense wealth couldn't erase the realities of distance and competing priorities. As the months turned into years, the signs became harder to ignore. Amal's absence from key Hollywood events raised eyebrows, while George's solo appearances sparked quiet speculation among industry insiders. Their once frequent date nights in Italy grew rarer, replaced by conflicting schedules and professional obligations. Publicly, they maintained the illusion of harmony, but those closest to them, like Brad Pitt, saw the cracks widening behind closed doors. And according to Pitt, those cracks weren't just about distance. They were about something much deeper. Brad Pitt speaks out. Brad Pitt has never been one to shy away from honesty, especially when it comes to the realities of Hollywood relationships. Having weathered his own highly publicized divorce from Angelina Jolie, Pitt understands better than most how fame magnifies flaws and turns private struggles into headline fodder. That's why his recent comments about George Clooney's marriage sent shockwaves through the entertainment world. What Pitt revealed wasn't just another story of clashing schedules or drifting apart. It was something far more personal and far more revealing. According to Pitt, the changes in Clooney were subtle at first. During their long-standing friendship, which dates back to the early 2000s and their time together on the set of Ocean's 11, the two had shared countless private moments, late-night conversations, vacations, and industry events. Pitt had seen Clooney evolve from Hollywood's most eligible bachelor to a doting husband and father, but somewhere along the way that transformation began to reverse itself. It was during a weekend gathering at Pitt's French chateau in Provence that the first real red flag appeared. George and Amal arrived separately, a minor detail perhaps, but one that spoke volumes to someone as observant as Pitt. Throughout the weekend, the couple moved around each other like distant planets in separate orbits. Gone was the playful banter and effortless chemistry that had once defined their relationship. Instead, their interactions felt formal, almost rehearsed, as if they were performing for the sake of appearances. Pitt later admitted that at first he brushed it off. Every couple has rough patches, he reportedly said, but this was different. It wasn't just stress or fatigue. It was like they were living separate lives. It wasn't until Pitt spent more time with Clooney, both on and off set, that the full picture came into focus. According to him, the marriage wasn't just strained by distance or ambition. It was being pulled apart by something far more unexpected. Conflicting worlds. The heart of the problem, according to Brad Pitt, lay in the fundamental differences between George and Amal's worlds. While they had initially bonded over their shared passion for justice and humanitarian work, the realities of their careers pulled them in opposite directions. George, despite his political activism and philanthropic efforts, was still deeply entrenched in the world of Hollywood, an industry built on social engagements, red carpets, and a constant cycle of projects. Amal, on the other hand, operated within the structured, high-stakes realm of international law, where discretion, discipline, and precision were non-negotiable. Pitt described it as two trains running on parallel tracks, close enough to see each other but never truly intersecting. When they first married, the excitement of blending their worlds masked the underlying incompatibilities. Amal would accompany George to premieres and award shows, while George would sit quietly in the back of courtrooms during some of Amal's most high-profile cases. But as their careers progressed and their family grew, those moments of overlap became increasingly rare. Parenthood only amplified the divide. The birth of their twins in the summer of 2017 was supposed to be a unifying chapter, a shared adventure that would solidify their bond. But while George embraced fatherhood with his trademark humor and charm, Amal approached it with the same intensity she brought to her legal work. Pitt recalled Clooney confiding in him during one of their private catch-ups. "She's incredible, Brad, but sometimes I feel like I'm playing catch-up in my own family." The logistical challenges of their jet-setting lifestyle didn't help. Their home spanned multiple continents: Lake Como in Italy, a sprawling estate in the English countryside, a luxurious mansion in Los Angeles, and a sleek apartment in Manhattan. Private jets and personal staff made the logistics manageable, but no amount of luxury could compensate for the emotional distance that grew with each passing year. Pitt's conclusion was blunt. They were living the dream, but they weren't living it together. The toll of parenthood. For many couples, the arrival of children strengthens the foundation of a marriage, but for George and Amal Clooney, parenthood introduced an entirely new set of challenges, ones that neither of them had fully anticipated. When Ella and Alexander were born in June of 2017, George was 56 years old, an age when most men are preparing for retirement rather than midnight feedings and toddler tantrums. While he embraced fatherhood with enthusiasm, often joking about being the world's oldest new dad, the reality was far less glamorous. Brad Pitt, who had gone through his own parenting struggles under the unforgiving glare of the media, saw the toll it took on his friend. George loved those kids more than anything, Pitt reportedly said, but he was running on empty. Late nights, early mornings, constant travel, it wears you down. Clooney's career, while more flexible than Amal's, still demanded long hours on set, meetings with producers and promotional tours that took him away from home for weeks at a time. Meanwhile, Amal was juggling motherhood with some of the most demanding cases of her career, including representing Yazidi survivors of ISIS atrocities and advocating for press freedom across the globe. Initially, they tried to split their responsibilities evenly. George would adjust his filming schedule to accommodate Amal's court appearances, while Amal would limit her travel during George's busiest months. But as their professional commitments continued to grow, so did the strain. Amal's absence from Hollywood events became more noticeable, while George's missed appearances at international galas sparked quiet speculation among insiders. The couple, once inseparable, began to live increasingly separate lives. Pitt later reflected on this period, saying, "It wasn't just about being busy, it was about feeling disconnected, like they were ticking boxes rather than sharing a life." And according to him, it was during this time that the most significant shift occurred, one that would eventually lead to the unraveling of their marriage. Media pressure and public image. As the cracks in George and Amal Clooney's marriage grew wider, the relentless glare of the media only made matters worse. In Hollywood, appearances are everything, and for a couple as high profile as the Clooneys, every move was scrutinized. What had once been flattering media coverage celebrating their fairy tale romance slowly shifted into thinly veiled speculation. Tabloids dissected their body language at events, while online forums buzzed with rumors about what might be happening behind closed doors. Brad Pitt, having faced the same unforgiving spotlight during his split from Angelina Jolie, recognized the pattern immediately. He once commented, "In this town, you're not just living your life, you're performing it for an audience that never looks away." Every missed appearance by Amal, every red carpet event George attended solo became fuel for gossip. Photos of the couple looking tired or distant, perfectly normal moments for any long-term relationship, were framed as evidence of an impending breakup. The pressure to maintain the image of a perfect power couple took its toll. Both George and Amal, known for their poise and composure, began to show signs of strain. George, once the life of the party at Hollywood events, seemed quieter, more reserved. Amal, always impeccably polished, appeared less frequently alongside her husband. According to insiders, the effort to keep up appearances became exhausting and ultimately unsustainable. Pitt's observations were clear. The image they were selling to the world, it wasn't real anymore. It was like watching two people stuck in a role they didn't want to play. And in Hollywood, once the illusion shatters, there's no putting it back together. The media, once their greatest ally, had become an unforgiving judge, amplifying every flaw and pushing the couple further apart. The mysterious third factor. While distance, career pressures, and parenthood certainly strained George and Amal's marriage, Brad Pitt hinted at another more unexpected factor, a third element that quietly altered the dynamic between them. This wasn't about infidelity or scandal, but rather about personal evolution. The way people change over time, sometimes in directions that no longer align. According to Pitt, George's lifestyle, even after marriage and fatherhood, remained deeply rooted in the social fabric of Hollywood. Dinners with producers, late-night brainstorming sessions, and spontaneous trips to film locations. Amal, by contrast, was increasingly drawn into the gravity of her humanitarian work, often spending weeks abroad, immersed in cases involving life-or-math stakes. "It's hard to stay connected when your daily realities are so different," Pitt explained. One person's dealing with international law and the other's discussing casting choices over cocktails. Those worlds don't always mix. More importantly, Pitt noted a shift in priorities. George, once content with the jet-setting lifestyle, began to crave stability as he grew older, while Amal's career was reaching new heights, demanding even more travel and commitment. They were both chasing purpose, Pitt observed, but their definitions of it no longer lined up. The emotional distance that followed wasn't dramatic or explosive, it was quiet, gradual, and ultimately irreversible. In the end, the third factor wasn't a person or a scandal, it was time itself. People change, and sometimes love can't bridge the gap that growth creates. As Pitt put it, they didn't fall out of love, they just fell out of sync. And once that happens, even the strongest foundations can crumble, no matter how glamorous they appear from the outside. Julia Roberts, rumors, red herring angle. As whispers of trouble in George and Amal's marriage began to circulate, another familiar name entered the conversation: Julia Roberts. Clooney and Roberts had shared a famously close friendship for over 2 decades, ever since they first starred together in Ocean's 11 in the early 2000s. Their playful banter, inside jokes, and undeniable on-screen chemistry often fueled speculation, though both had consistently maintained that their relationship was purely platonic. But when Pitt's revelations about Clooney's marital struggles came to light, the tabloids wasted no time in dragging Roberts into the narrative. Headlines questioned whether Roberts' continued presence in Clooney's life had created tension in his marriage. The truth, according to Pitt, was far less salacious. Julia's always been like a sister to George, he clarified. If anything, she was one of the few people he could talk to about what was really going on. In fact, Roberts had reportedly been one of the first to notice the emotional distance growing between George and Amal. During a casual dinner at Clooney's Lake Como villa, she allegedly confided in Pitt, saying, "They're not laughing the way they used to. Something's off." While the tabloids painted Roberts as a potential wedge, those close to the couple knew better. If anything, she was a sounding board, a confidant who had seen Clooney through every stage of his personal and professional life. Ultimately, the rumors surrounding Roberts proved to be nothing more than a red herring, distractions from the deeper issues at play. Pitt was clear on one point: blaming Julia was easy for the gossip columns, but the truth? The truth was a lot more complicated and a lot more human. The real breaking point. While the media fixated on Hollywood gossip and red carpet appearances, the real breaking point in George and Amal's marriage was far more personal and far less visible to the public eye. According to Brad Pitt, it wasn't a single explosive argument or dramatic betrayal that fractured their bond. Instead, it was the slow, relentless accumulation of unmet needs, unspoken frustrations, and diverging priorities. Pitt described it as death by 1,000 cuts, small moments of disconnect that, on their own, seemed insignificant, but over time created an emotional chasm between the once inseparable couple. Amal's demanding career in international law required her to spend extended periods in Europe and the Middle East, often working on cases involving war crimes and human rights abuses. George, meanwhile, was rooted in the fast-paced world of Hollywood, juggling film projects, production commitments, and industry events. They were living in 2 completely different realities, Pitt explained. Amal was dealing with life and death situations while George was reading scripts and attending premieres. It's hard to stay connected when your daily experiences are so far apart. The arrival of their twins, Ella and Alexander, in 2017 only magnified the strain. While both adored their children, the logistical challenges of parenting across multiple time zones proved overwhelming. According to Pitt, the final breaking point came during the pandemic. With travel restrictions in place and Hollywood on pause, George and Amal were forced to spend an extended period together, something that ironically highlighted just how far they had drifted apart. When you strip away the distractions, Pitt noted, you're left with the truth. And sometimes the truth is that love isn't enough to hold 2 people together. Clooney's graceful exit. Despite the mounting challenges, George Clooney approached the end of his marriage with the same dignity and grace that had defined his public persona for decades. According to Brad Pitt, there was no dramatic confrontation, no bitter legal battle, and no public airing of grievances. Instead, Clooney quietly accepted the reality of the situation and focused on ensuring a smooth transition for everyone involved, especially their children. George isn't the kind of guy who thrives on drama, Pitt explained. He's always been about finding solutions, not creating more problems. When it became clear that the marriage was no longer sustainable, Clooney and Amal reportedly sat down together, away from the prying eyes of the media, and had an honest conversation about their future. Both agreed that their primary focus would be on co-parenting Ella and Alexander, ensuring that the twins would continue to experience love, stability, and support from both parents. In public, Clooney maintained his characteristic charm and discretion. When asked about his marriage in interviews, he spoke only in positive terms, emphasizing the respect and admiration he still held for Amal. "She's an incredible woman," he told one reporter. "We built something beautiful together and will always be family." Pitt, for his part, admired how Clooney navigated the split. "It's easy to get bitter," he said, "but George chose kindness. That's rare in this town." Even as the divorce was finalized, there were no leaks, no scandals, and no finger-pointing. Instead, the Clooneys quietly closed one chapter of their lives and began another, one defined not by romantic love, but by mutual respect and shared responsibility. And in true Clooney fashion, George did it all with a smile, reminding the world that, even in heartbreak, there's room for grace. So what really happened to George and Amal Clooney's seemingly perfect marriage? Was it doomed from the start, or was it simply another casualty of the relentless pressure that comes with fame, ambition, and the pursuit of perfection? According to Brad Pitt, the answer is both simpler and more heartbreaking than the tabloids would have you believe. "They loved each other," Pitt concluded. "There's no question about that. But sometimes love isn't enough. Not when life pulls you in opposite directions." In the end, it wasn't scandal, betrayal, or drama that ended their marriage. It was the quiet realization that they had become two people living parallel lives, connected by shared memories, but separated by incompatible futures. George and Amal's story serves as a sobering reminder that even the most glamorous relationships aren't immune to the challenges of real life. Behind the red carpets, designer gowns, and magazine covers are human beings, flawed, vulnerable, and searching for happiness in a world that often demands sacrifice. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go. As for Clooney, he remains the consummate gentleman, gracious in defeat, optimistic about the future, and ever the Hollywood icon. "Life goes on," he told Pitt during one of their last conversations about the divorce, "and if you're lucky, you come out the other side a little wiser, a little kinder, and a lot more grateful for the moments that mattered." And with that, the curtain falls on one of Hollywood's most captivating love stories, not with scandal or bitterness, but with quiet acceptance and enduring respect.